Futures now, old man.
What it do? Seahawks have two. Who put that in there? This is Future First Podcast, where we help you win today with the Future First mindset. I'm your co-host, J Mac, here with my co-host, Jose. What's up, dude?
Not much, man. Coming off fresh off the Super Bowl, a bit of a snoozer for everybody that was, no rooting interest. If you're a Pats fan, I'm sorry. I mean, you can suffer a little longer, like the rest of us that haven't won Super Bowls in 30 years. And then, if you're a Seahawks fan, congratulations. Total, complete annihilation, domination. I don't think the scoreboard really does any justice for how dominant of a game it really was. But besides that, man, how you been, J-Mac?
I've been all right, man. Yeah, the the Super Bowl was, I don't know, lackluster. I mean, I especially didn't want the Seahawks to win. It didn't make it any better. I have my wife in the house rooting for them just because she didn't want the Patriots to win. And then my son started rooting for the Patriots and then mid-game flipped over rooting for the Seahawks. And so I had both of them just in my face, like, Seahawks won. I'm like, yeah, great. Uh, but I mean, that's then the breaks, you know? It's the breaks. Couldn't even
Yeah.
win a Super Bowl square.
That's hilarious. Yeah, I mean, we had a little side kind of action just between me and my family where we kind of just picked some different props and just to keep it exciting. I went out, but my son was pretty close. Stuff like the national anthem time, the first song for the halftime, just some fun stuff. Just keep it interesting since there was
Nice.
no real rooting interest besides my wife, who was, not super into football, but she roots for the Seahawks.
Okay.
So
Well, hey, then congrats to her, I guess. Uh, and then, did you guys bet on Gatorade color?
yeah, we did. Actually, they got it
Okay.
right. My son and my
Nice.
wife got it right with yellow.
Yeah,
But
they did you see him like they started showing them mixing it like in the middle of the game? I was like, is it too late to place a bet?
yeah, exactly. I'm sure they got a lot of bets in mid game, and they probably canceled all those.
Yeah. All right. Well, the Super Bowl is officially in the rearview mirror. We are now officially in the off season, not only the NFL, but the Dynasty season, where we're looking forward to rookie prospects in the draft and all that. So that's what we're going to dive into here on this episode here. But before we do, we still have the roster review services going on. We just finished our first one for an entire league, and we're going to get that cut up here and kind of show you guys what that looks like on our end and what we provide as the service. But I mean, what it is in general, I'll tell you right now. We'll review your dynasty rosters and provide roster construction feedback, give you general moves, even a few specific moves to improve your team. If you have a startup coming up and you want a tailored draft strategy for that specific format, we'll do that too. We're asking $5 per team. You can send a roster review request to futurefirstpod@gmail.com if you're interested, and we can get you guys more information there. In this case, we did a whole league review, which is kind of fun. It was a little bit of work on our end, but I don't know. I had a lot of fun doing it. It was fun, having the interconnection between all the teams that we reviewed and doing that. So when you look out for that, you guys can kind of have that context. And then finally, to promote the roster reviews, we're doing a free team giveaway. Just make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below to enter into the giveaway. And if you do that, we'll get you guys into a drawing, and we've got 3 more shows here of this, and everyone that's done that over that time period, we'll get them entered into the giveaway, and we'll start that roster review once March turns there. So, how did you like the roster review that we did, Jose?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was a lot of fun. It was pretty cool to break down someone else's leagues and just kind of have fun with it. Talk a little trash to between the
Yeah.
league mates because it seemed like they've been going for quite a while, so they kind of seemed like they got that kind of camaraderie. So it was fun to pick apart teams and come at them from different perspectives, different angles of how you can improve when they're not your own teams. Right? I think it's sometimes easier to evaluate other teams because you don't have that attachment to the players
All right.
because they're your players and your picks. So yeah, I thought it was a lot of fun. We got pretty good feedback from the guys there. They thoroughly enjoyed it. So, if you're looking for something similar or maybe just something more personalized, give us a try. Let us see what we can do for you if we can help you out. And it always kind of helps to have that second pair of eyes on your team of how can you improve.
Yeah, agreed. Yep. And if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure to touch down on that like button. Go for 2 on the subscribe. Be sure to drop a comment while you're there, especially if you want to get in that free givey. And if you're catching this episode on the Player Profiler Network, be sure to follow us directly on our YouTube channel, Future First Pod, or just search Future First Podcast wherever you get your podcasts. That's on Spotify, Apple Pods, everywhere now. Shout out to Fox, who's been helping us with our graphics. You can follow her at pfoxworth07. She recently told us that she's going to be handling the whole TikTok for Player Profiler now. So congrats to you, Fox. You earned it. Obviously, you're great with all the social media stuff and the graphics. So I know you're going to kill it over there. Keep going. And then shout out to McGrumble, who's been helping us with all our stats. You can follow him on X at ff_McGrumble. All right, and like we said at the top here, we are getting into the rookies here, and today we're going to dive into a few, or should I say a couple, rookie quarterback prospects here. And then as we were kind of preparing this episode for that, we had a little bit of like a disagreement, Jose and I, about, I guess, quarterback drafting strategy. So we're going to get into some kind of theory on that in general, at least when it comes to Superflex. So you can look forward to that here. But first, as always, a quick hit. You ready, Jose?
Yep, let's do it.
All right, here we are in the quick hit. We have the Super Bowl thoughts and reactions. We're just gonna keep it light tonight and talk about what good and what bad came out of that Super Bowl, man. So why don't you lead us off here on your thoughts on?
Yeah, I mean, overall, I think you kind of saw, as you kind of have through most of the playoffs, the coming down to earth of Drake Maye. I don't think necessarily it hurts his stock too much going into next season. I think if there is people that are doubting him or what have you, it's definitely maybe an interesting time to go try to ask about Drake Maye, because I think a lot of people are really high and he didn't necessarily perform to that level in the playoffs. Kenneth Walker, especially after his the injury to Charbonnet, pretty much secured himself a big bag either there or somewhere else. He clearly showed what he could do when he's by himself and being healthy, right? He won MVP for the Super Bowl. So, the ref stole a touchdown, it was 60-yard touchdown or something right there at the end, which was kind of pretty lame. But yeah, man, in terms of those were kind of the 2 main players. I guess the third would be Sam Darnold. I mean, he didn't do anything super amazing besides maybe the Rams game where he played it quite well. But I think he secured himself a starting job. And I think in terms of like a Superflex Dynasty value, which is a lot of what we're going to be talking about today, he secured himself a place, I think, on most people's rosters as that quarterback 2, decently reliable. We'll have to see what happens if Kubiak does leave. But yeah, I mean, those were kind of the 3 main players for Dynasty who I think, were affected, or at least had some, are going to have some lingering effects of people, this is the last thing of football that they saw at the Super Bowl. And for some of them, it was not so great. And the others, it was pretty good.
Yeah, I'm with you. Like, I don't know, like I like May and I think he's really good. It just wasn't encouraging, like I think the criticism for him going into that game, of all the things that you could criticize other than the soft schedule, was that he takes too many sacks and that he fumbles the ball. And he did both of those things in this game. And I don't necessarily put that on him, but at some point the pattern becomes evident that it's not the offensive line, right? Like he's got to know that he's got to get rid of that ball, or that he's got to protect it better. So it's not encouraging seeing him. I expect to see a value dip on him in Dynasty coming out of the Super Bowl, just on that primetime stage, the primest of all primetime stage, right, at the Super Bowl, and just watching them kind of not really do much with the opportunity. Yeah, the Kenneth Walker one is really interesting, especially with Sharps out next year. Him getting MVP, I think only kind of I expect to see a value bump for him, and I don't know that it'll necessarily be warranted. I'm going to be really skeptical of the Seahawks offense, especially if Kubiak leaves. I think that I guess it'll depend on who's going to come in, but man, did you know we had, I think it was 26 offensive coordinator changes or something or something crazy like that in the league this year. So as we've seen all these offensive coordinators get shuffled around, like who's left, right? Like they're going to have to bring someone, either old that's proven but is kind of past their prime, or they're going to have to bring in someone young from like the college system to kind of get it done. And I don't feel like I'm going to be in on the Seahawks all that much. In fact, one of the moves I'm trying to make right now is to move off of Jackson Smith and Jigba and to get into like a younger, honestly, like who I'm trying to get into is Malik Neighbors, but we'll see. We'll get into that. But yeah, I guess fantasy apart, man, how about the halftime show?
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty good. I mean, personally, I had a lot of people, not a lot of people over, but the people that were over, most of them were there for the halftime show. Pretty big Bad Bunny fans. I thought it was well. I was only kind of disappointment was I didn't really understand the connection to Lady Gaga. That was kind of random for me personally, like knowing his kind of work and her work. That seemed kind of weird and off, but she did a great job. I mean, she's a great performer herself. So, it wasn't that she did bad. It just seemed off. And then his most popular song on his last album, the one that's like retrending as number one, he like only did like the last like 10 seconds there. That was a little weird. I thought maybe, he'd put more attention, but overall he's, he had cool, personally, I thought, cool messaging, cool aesthetic, like what it looked like.
Yeah.
And he did a great job. So, it was fun. I wouldn't say an all-timer by any means, but, his music is fun and he's fun. So I thought he did a pretty good job.
Yeah, I agree. I'm curious to kind of see if any controversy comes out of it, like we had last year. I mean, with Kendrick Lamar, like it was kind of wild. Like who came out of the woodworks to complain about that? But I think that Bunny did a really good job. I'm not like a huge fan of his music necessarily, but I did appreciate the message and I did like everything that went on there. Hey man, and as a millennial, seeing Ricky Martin come back to relevancy was always fun. All right, man. Let's plug some fast draft here. We have the Origins is going to be, I'm sure, is going to start skyrocketing now that we have the regular season done. So you can get into that. I played some of the Super Bowl Slam this year, which is their DFS contest, or sorry, this week. I did terrible. I put a lot on JSN and kind of built the same roster with one player different, just trying to hit, thinking that those players would go. But yeah, obviously JSN left for half the game. So, but I am looking forward to getting in those Origins drafts. And then also I think the Rabbit is launching here, which is their more traditional best ball with 10 teams. I think you draft 16 players. And I haven't done that one yet, but I think that'll be fun to get into it. But yeah, I hope if you guys do want to get into fast draft, you can use code FUTURE for a deposit match of $50. And that'll get you going. That'll get you, at least 5 free drafts. And if you wait, the Origins tournament goes to $5. So that'll actually get you 10 free drafts in the Origin. Yeah, hope to see you guys around there. And then we're going to roll an ad here for the Podfather and the Dynasty Dominator.
If you play in Dynasty, you need Dynasty Deluxe, our premium package for Dynasty Leaguers. We rank over 300 players, updated every week, all year long. And there's a win now mode and a rebuild mode with Superflex and tight end premium controls. And a Dynasty League sync where you can say, sync down all of my sleeper teams, all my FFPC teams. And then you can browse around your leagues for who has needs. And then you can use our trade finder to see what kinds of trades are happening in leagues that are similar to the one I want to do. Then you can analyze trades using our trade analyzer, which balances the lifetime value, which includes pick values out to like 2028. All of that plus the rookie guide, $25 value is included. So if you're just in one Dynasty League, Dynasty Deluxe is well worth it. And use your host's promo code, and you can bump up to All In and get $25 off.
All right, welcome back. We're jumping into our segment here with our QB prospects, where we're going to break down the 2026 relevant rookie QBs that are coming in to the NFL here. And I guess there's not a lot to talk about here in terms of the players and the depth. I mean, we talked about it on our last episode where there's only one quarterback projected to go in the first round, and there may be another one sneaking in to the first round at the back end. But if anything, there's another one going early second, at least as predicted by PFF's big board. Oh, also, I should note that the data that we were presenting on last week's episode was actually not from PFF's big board. That was from the mock draft database, I think is what we were quoted with. So sorry to misrepresent that last week. But you guys, I think it carries over for the most part. It's still the same idea, just the data was from a different source. So as we dive into these quarterback prospects here, I think the name to know is Fernando Mendoza. He's the projected 101 for the NFL draft, going to the Raiders, who are in need of a quarterback, who are looking to go into a rebuild here. And to kick things off with Indiana Hoosiers championship winning quarterback. The other name that we're expecting to sneak in here is Ty Simpson. So those will be the two that we'll be talking about here. And Ty Simpson is of the Crimson Tide. And besides that, I mean, it's kind of a weird year too, because we have like 3 quarterbacks who are fighting to go back to college who haven't won that fight. So they may end up in the NFL draft. And those would be Chambliss. And then there's another one, Joey, I'm blanking on Aguilar. And then the third one, I can't remember, but there's 3 of them that are fighting to go back. So if they come in, I don't think we're expecting them to make a splash in the NFL draft, but who knows? They might. And if they do, then we can kind of revisit that as we go. But right now, we didn't want to waste too much time talking about someone who may not even come into the draft year. So, all right, let's discuss. Go ahead, Jose. You want to jump in here, man?
Oh no, I was just gonna kind of add it's a pretty interesting thing with those guys trying to go back, because if they lose the appeal, I think one of them was denied and then appealed. The other one is just trying to fight for the extra year of eligibility. Depending on when in the process that happens, it could be really weird because they've already missed the Senior Bowl, which a couple of them, with how long they've been there, could have used that to help their draft stock.
Yeah.
How late into this process, will they miss the combine? I haven't heard. I'm not super into the college, so I don't know if all that is expected to be sorted out before combines and pro days. But I mean, they could have 2 or 3 of these guys that are important for the NFL, not just rookie drafts that we're doing, come into the process way later. So it could be very interesting in that sense. Like you said, none of the guys that are fighting to go back to school are necessarily super relevant. Maybe I think Chambliss would kind of be more the most interesting guy, but yeah, man. Otherwise, that was kind of just the only thing I was thinking about with these guys that are trying to go back to school for that money.
Yeah, the Chambliss one is interesting too, because not only does he have a claim in with the NCAA, but he also has a claim in with the state to fight for eligibility through the state. I'm not really sure. I know that one is extra complicated, and we were supposed to have clarity this week because they had their hearings, and I think most of them were denied in their hearings, but there's an appeal process, so there's more going on there. And as we get more information, we'll kind of fill you guys in on what's going on. But for now, let's focus on the guys that we do know are entering into the NFL draft. The first one being Fernando Mendoza, which we'll put up on the screen here, a graphic that we prepared. of his 2025 season stats. We have here that he is the QB1 coming in from the draft class. He played for the Indiana Hoosiers. How do you say? Am I saying that right? Hoosiers? Hoosiers?
Who knows? I don't know. I don't know. I've heard it say more like Hoosiers, like a stronger on the S.
Yeah.
IR, like, but I don't even know how to spell that. So, whatever. The Indiana, man. Like, sorry if you're out there and you're a big Indiana fan. Not trying to diss you or anything, but like, yeah, you're the Indiana team that plays out there.
Hoosiers. Okay. He played 16 games in 2025, throwing for 3,536 yards, amassing 41 touchdowns over that time, which is pretty impressive. Only 6 interceptions in that time span, also with a quarterback rating of 129.4. So pretty good. And then we have some other stats here that McGrumble really likes to look at that isolate the quarterback from their system and kind of look at them as more like a raw talent or skill perspective here. And that one is one of them being adjusted completion percentage, which is his completion percentage, which takes out throwaways or drops or passes that were blocked at the line of scrimmage, those kind of things. And his adjusted completion percentage was 78.9%, which is pretty solid. Another one here was the big time throw rate. And that's the percentage of attempts that are big time throws. So those are the throws that are getting pushed downfield. And that was 5.7%, which was 13th out of the class, the incoming class or relevant quarterbacks. And again, that was out of 59 quarterbacks that had at least 150 dropbacks. I had to kind of put a line in there somewhere to filter out all those guys that, played like a quarter or,
Right.
like a game at most. So 5.7, 13th in the class, not too bad, but not necessarily great. And then the last one here was the pressure to sack rate, which is the percentage of pressures that turned into sacks. And it's actually pretty high for Fernando Mendoza's sake, which is 18.9%, which was good for 36th out of 59 out of all those quarterbacks. So, and I want to say too, he had a pretty decent offensive line. So I guess the amount of pressures that did come in his way, 1 in 5 of them essentially were turning into sacks. Not great, but I guess you hope that that's not necessarily a processing, a stain on his processing, and more just his wide receivers weren't super great that were getting open. But I mean, from the film I've watched, the wide receivers he had were pretty strong. I think we had Elijah Surratt was one of them, and then Omar Jordan Jr. I think is the other one. Both of those guys are top wide receiver prospects coming in from that class, or I should say like top 10 ish. So pretty decent wide receiver. So maybe this is a processing stat here that we should pay a little bit more attention to. But Jose, I guess if you're looking at any of these stats, is there anything you like, or is there anything that kind of jumps out here, or something that you wish we would take a little deeper dive on?
No, I mean, there was one stat that I was looking at that I know gets mentioned a decent amount, especially when you're looking at, and this is something we could definitely ask Mick Rumble to get in here, is we look at it for running backs, but yards, rush yardage share for their team, right? When we're talking about quarterbacks, like we definitely care about that in terms of like being able to break fantasy, and be that kind of real difference maker. And so we don't have that, but it's not great from what he did. So he's not looking anything special on that front. And the problem is with Mendoza for me is none of the stats look very amazing, like or jump out at me. Like you go back to maybe the best pocket passer that has come out in the last like 5-ish years, right? And that would probably be Joe Burrow. And his stats were something along the lines of like 5,600 yards, 60 touchdowns, 76.3% completion. I didn't get the true completion percentage. A QBR of 202. Joe Burrow obviously had like one of the greatest college seasons that year. But I mean, that's what you're talking about. If you want a difference maker that's a pocket passer for fantasy, those are kind of the things you are hoping to see coming out of college, because if you can do it in college, there's, obviously more chance that you will be able to put up one of those elite pocket passing seasons. I know Mendoza had that great rush to get into the end zone there at the end of the game. That was awesome. I mean, he clearly has some talent, but I think even when I was looking at it, Joe Burrow had more rushing yards in 2019 coming out of college than he did this year. I don't have that right here in front of me, but when I looked it up, I thought I was pretty, Joe Burrow, you don't think of him as a mobile quarterback, and he even had more rush yards. So it's just not like very exciting. Like if you were rebuilding at the beginning of this season, I feel like going into the college season, there was a good amount of quarterbacks that were, hey, maybe these guys are, we're going to have like 5 quarterbacks go in the top 15, right? And then a bunch of them went back to college. A bunch of them played themselves out of even going to the NFL. And then some of them that, were maybe going to be forced to come out are now fighting to go back. So there's just a lot working against this quarterback class. Mendoza seems okay. It's just, if I'm rebuilding, and especially our episode here is today kind of focused on a super flex market, you're just not very happy, right? Like if you have no quarterbacks, if you sold out everything and you have like no starting quarterbacks, or you have like a Bryce Young or a Cam Ward, right? Maybe you had a good pick last year and you went Cam Ward. You're kind of back in a spot where you're like, man, I'm not excited to take Mendoza, right? As a rebuilder, you don't see a place where on the Raiders, right, where he's projected to go, he's going to spike in value where maybe you can trade. Your only hope there is kind of maybe to trade the pick when it, if great things start coming out of, the testing and the combine and his interviews, right? Everybody loves Mendoza. I mean, the problem is we already know he's going 101 basically. So it's like anything that comes out could just be the Raiders trying to sell tickets. It's not the same as when it was a competition, right? When it was Bryce Young and CJ Stroud fighting for that number 1 pick, there was more hype, more buzz that you could build around the pick and sell it. When Mendoza is going to go 101 in terms of NFL terms, and there's no competition to take that from him, it doesn't hit the same when an interview comes out or some, insider breaks, he had a great interview with the Raiders. Oh my God, this kid's so smart. He can analyze. He took every hard question. He was, it's like, well, if the Raiders are dead set on picking him, like, they're not going to come out and be like, yeah, guys, he had a horrible interview. It was disastrous. It was, so it just changes a lot of things, right? When there's just no supply, right? Like it's a supply and demand, and there's just barely any supply, right? Like we're talking about 2 guys that maybe go in the first round of the NFL draft, not even for rookie, not even for dynasty or fantasy, right? We're just talking pure NFL draft. That's already a very, very bad indicator for fantasy success when you're not going in the first round, right? In the early first round. So overall, Mendoza seems fine. Honestly, like if I can get him, like we were starting to talk about this, in the middle of the first or even later, somehow he slips. But I think that's going to go into what we're going to talk about later. I don't think anybody's going to let him slip that far just because of the need at Superflex, in Superflex leagues. People will reach, or what I think will be reaching on him. So besides that, I mean, you do like to see his low interception totals, right? He did take care of the ball. You see that. And to me, he's just like, okay. I'm not like I don't hate him as a prospect. I think he could potentially develop into a decent starting quarterback in the NFL, but how much fantasy value, right? Like, are you super excited, to have Jared Goff on your team? Not really. I mean, you're like, okay, Jared Goff, sure. But you're not like clamoring and you're not like excited, right, to be starting him every week.
Yeah, that's the comp I hear a lot for him is Jared Goff. And then just going back, his rush attempts, since we don't have it up there, 76 rush attempts on the season for 377 yards, 7 touchdowns, 5 fumbles. 34 of those were scrambles. 42 of those were designed runs. He does have that kind of in his game, or at least that in Indiana, they were using his legs quite a bit. Like you said, on that 4th down play in the championship game, that was a designed run play that they called his number. And they only needed a first down. It wasn't a touchdown, but he definitely stretched it into a touchdown to win the game. I do like that play, at least to show that, he's got it in him to put it on the line and make it happen. And I don't know, I guess aside from, draft strategy and, reading the NFL draft and what that means for these prospects, when I turned on the film for him and what I saw a competent quarterback who's got a good arm, an accurate arm. He can deliver the ball with anticipation. He doesn't necessarily have the greatest footwork, I would say, but he does have the presence to kind of stand in the pocket and deliver the ball. So yeah, I mean, I think a Goff is kind of a really fair comp to what we're getting here coming out. So take that with what you will. I think Mendoza is going to be drafted in rookie picks if he goes number 1 overall in the top 4 in a super flex easily. It's just a matter of where in the top 4. And obviously you want to get him at that 1-4 price, then you do want to have to, reach and get him at that 1-2 price. It reminds me a lot of this 2025 class. Like Cam Ward was pretty securely going the 101 to the Titans last year, and there wasn't really much discussion for the quarterbacks behind him. People liked some of these other guys like Jackson Dart, and they weren't really sure what to do with a lot of the other prospects. And look how kind of Cam Ward turned out. Honestly, I still like Cam Ward. I think what we saw on tape from him in the NFL last year, there's some promising stuff. It's just, what was he working with? He had no wide receivers to throw to. The offensive line was really bad. The coaching was terrible. He's kind of getting revitalized here going into this next year, and I'm more hopeful that he'll be able to kind of have a bounce back year there. So I think there's a lot of parallels between the quarterback class we had last year and this year, especially as we heard Jose break down, what it means to have no competition for that QB1 spot of the NFL draft. Okay. We talked a little long here on Mendoza. Let's jump into our next guy, unless you have anything quick more you want to add to.
No, I'm good. Let's talk about Mr. Simpson.
Mr. Simpson, Ty Simpson, that is, quarterback 2 of the class, as we're declaring it, played for the Alabama Crimson Tide, played in 15 games, had 3,561 yards, 28 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, a quarterback rating of 102.5, an adjusted completion percentage of 75.3%, a big time throw percentage of 6.0%, good for 11th out of 59th in this class, and a pressure to sack ratio of 18.3%, good for 34th. So taking more sacks than he should have, probably. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I think it's a lot of the same stuff here. Like, if Ty Simpson ends up going in the back of the first or the early second, and someone kind of takes a shot on him, and the NFL says that they believe in this guy, I think I'm going to be excited for him. Just comparing it to, again, last year's class, I think it was a way wiser decision to kind of take those high-end picks and spend it on, one of the better prospects, and then take that back of the first round pick and use it on a dart throw. Like, if you would have been able to do that, Dart would have made you a lot of value where he's sitting now in the market. So I'm thinking kind of Simpson is that similar bet. If he does go there, like, he probably end up getting drafted in the back of the first in Superflex, and I think it's fine process to take that quarterback at that spot there. Jose might have some different opinions there.
No, I mean, I think that's more in line with how I would want to do, like what I would want to do. Ty Simpson doesn't really scream that sort of player, though. Like, he doesn't come off as having that upside with Dart. He kind of seemed like if he could get it going in the NFL, he had that rushing upside. Ty Simpson's just kind of a worse version of Mendoza, I would say. Like, he also only started 1 year, which kind of also screams Anthony Richardson to me. I mean, he started more games, I think, in high school and other stuff. Like, he has other experience, but in terms of his college experience, he's pretty much only had this year as a starter. And he kind of just timed it, right? I think he maybe read the tea leaves and saw, hey, like, there's a big demand, like there always is in the NFL for quarterbacks. Nobody else is really, even where like declaring, I can go and maybe I'm going in the first or late second or late first, early second, compared to another year or next year when there are some elite prospects where I might not get drafted or I might go in like the 4th or 5th round, right? So I think he did the smart kind of economics play of supply and demand and put himself out there in a better situation where now he has more of a chance just because of the quarterbacks available to go, get drafted way earlier, I think. So his as a prospect, it's just not much to go off, right? Only 15 games and none of them and particularly are, over the moon. Like it's very just meh again. He's not the type of player that I want to take a shot at later, like in the late first of Superflex or the second round. Like depends how late in the second, maybe, and how desperate I need a quarterback. But these type of players, just it's hard to see them pan out for the NFL and then pan out for the NFL and be fantasy relevant, right? Like there's a decent amount, like 10, 12 quarterbacks in the NFL that are fantasy irrelevant, basically, right? Like you don't really want to start them. Sure, you will start them if you need to, right? Like Geno Smith all this year, like sure, I get you could have started him, like Phillip Rivers when he came in, Sam Darnold for like half the season because half the games he would just not need to do anything. Like there's these quarterbacks that are NFL quarterbacks that are just not anything for fantasy, and I see that a lot more for Ty Simpson than I do him having some sort of 50, 45 passing touchdown, because that's what he need to do to be fantasy relevant, right? Like he's not rushing for 700 yards and 8 touchdowns or doing anything of that sort. So that's kind of how I feel and how I kind of see him coming into this draft right now.
Yeah, that's fair. I guess, I don't know. Let's table this conversation when we get into kind of the strategy here, because I feel like we're towing the line of getting into that. So let me just share my thoughts on like what I saw on film from this guy. And playing with Alabama, he was kind of surrounded by talent. Like obviously, Ryan Williams is on that team. I think what's the other guy's name? I think it's Jeremy Bernard. He was playing with like those two guys are pretty talented wide receivers, especially Ryan Williams, who padded the stats with a lot of yak, just to be frank. And I don't know. He's kind of skittish in the pocket. Like you see it sometimes where he kind of breaks down, and I think a lot of that was just stemming from they didn't have a great offensive line, and he didn't trust his left tackle there to kind of make the block. So you would see him kind of like do this weird duck and bounce thing when no one's really around him, and his footwork, it just reminded me of like a baseball player. He does this thing with his foot where he kind of like follows through and like brings his back foot forward, like kind of weird. And I don't know, just he was on the move a lot and could throw the ball fairly well mobily, which was a plus for him. But yeah, it just, when you watched him, he just didn't look like an NFL quarterback. But I don't know, maybe that changes. Like maybe those things can kind of be coached out of him. We'll see what the NFL thinks of him when we get to the draft. If he does go into the first round, I'm gonna end up taking my shots on him more than likely when it comes to the NFL or the rookie drafts here. Okay, yeah, that wraps up like the quarterback prospects we're gonna talk about. Some of the guys who will be coming out here that you can look forward to if you want to do a deeper dive on these guys are guys like Garrett Nussmeier, who kind of made a show for himself in the Senior Bowl, rose his stock there. Cade Klubnik is another guy that you could look into. Drew Alar. Those are probably like the top guys that we'll be seeing as far as who's getting drafted here. And then obviously like Trinidad Chambliss, like we were saying, depending on where he lands with his appeal with the NCAA. All right, let's take a short break here, and then we'll jump into some Thirsty for Theory, where we're going to discuss our strategy on drafting quarterbacks in the Superflex format. We'll see you in a second. Whoops.
You saw nothing.
Yeah. Let me get my put your glasses on. Yeah. Boop. There's my bright light. That'll be a good bit, man. Should I should we have some glasses ready?
Yeah.
And then I'll have a little flash that I could queue up, and we could just make people forget whatever we said if we had a,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah, that'd be good.
we could tell them a story, like what we want them to believe. All right, guys, here we are in our section here for Thirsty for Theory. We're just gonna kind of talk about where our heads are at with this Superflex quarterback draft strategy, and how this came about was I wanted to do a lot deeper dive on these quarterback prospects, and I wanted to include, some guys that I thought were maybe sleepers that maybe go into it. And Jose was wanting to do the quarterbacks and the tight ends in one episode, and I was like, I think we can stretch it out. I think we can do it. And he shared his thoughts on why he thinks it's not relevant, and that there's better information that we can get out to you guys. So I guess let's start there with your thoughts. So I'm not putting words in your mouth here, Jose.
Yeah, I mean, it's just an overall, like, it's hard for quarterbacks that are even taken in the first round to succeed in the NFL. Let's start with that as the basis, right? That's kind of the norm, right? We see so many players that get drafted, whether it's early or mid or late, right, that just completely burn out of the NFL and are not even relevant to the NFL, let alone for fantasy. Obviously, as you go deeper into the rounds, like, there's misses everywhere. The NFL gets things wrong all the time, but it's a lot harder, I think, to dissect when the NFL is going to get it wrong. Like, let's say a quarterback slips into the second round. Let's use somebody recent, right? Like Tyler Shuck, right? Obviously, I think he has more value than any other quarterback besides maybe Cam Ward, and maybe he's risen his stock to a level where he's approaching Cam Ward, and he was in the second round, right? He was like in the middle of the second round. I believe he was like the 40th pick or something like that. So, but how often does that happen, right? Like, how often in the second, third, fourth rounds are these quarterbacks that get taken as flyers actually turn into NFL starters and then turn into fantasy relevant players? I think at the quarterback position specifically, it's just a lot harder, right? It's the hardest position, so it's way harder to keep a job. The NFL does not have the patience to let you try for 5 years, right? We have Sam Darnold as a great example of what can happen if you don't perform right away. Or another Jets quarterback. Who's the guy? Oh, man, I'm blanking on his name right now.
Zach Wilson.
Zach Wilson. There you go. The guy the Cardinals drafted, Rosen, right?
Mm-hmm.
Josh Rosen. So, I mean, there's a litany of failed quarterbacks, and I think I just don't bet against that. I know more than the NFL in terms of fantasy. Like, taking a shot in the fourth round on a quarterback in a superflex, sure, like, I don't mind that, and my theory is a lot less focused on like your deeper later on in your rookie drafts, like the third and fourth rounds. For me, mostly what I'm focused on is the first and second round, right? And I don't want to be reaching for a quarterback simply because of the format, because it's, to me, has proven that it doesn't necessarily pay off. The amount of times and that you could have been drafting a running back that pays off, a wide receiver that pays off way earlier too, compared to a quarterback, just feels to me like there's a big difference there. Like, it feels like there's a much greater cost of opportunity, like the cost of the opportunity cost, sorry, of drafting a quarterback than drafting a running back or wide receiver.
Yeah, I think that's wise process. And I guess like the argument that I would make, and that you hear kind of echoed over time and time over again, is like these quarterbacks just maintain value, at least through the first year, right? Like, you have time to judge them after you see them in the NFL versus NFL defenses, and then you can kind of make a decision from there. Like, what you buy into them for is it's going to kind of maintain at that. I guess that is it is necessarily kind of hard to say too, because I mean, right now, like the 2026 102 is like at about 5,000. But if you look at Cam Ward's value, it's at like 3,600. So, that pick did probably lose value over time there. And I was trying to find a way to kind of prove this analytically or with numbers or I wanted to take a deeper dive on it to kind of have some evidence to kind of, either put that claim to justice or, maybe that's an old traditional thought that we need to just rethink, right? Because I think typically when it comes to Superflex, the quarterbacks have been retaining their value from year to year because we know it kind of takes time to develop them and for them to come into their own. But things have changed. Like the NFL isn't the same. Like teams and franchises can bounce back from a bad season and turn over. And in fact, like it's becoming so much more popular, and we see this with coaching carousels and like quarterback prospects. They're being turned over faster and faster. Like if they show them that they don't have it, they're really quick to kind of move on from them. Justin Fields is a really good example of that. We could even throw like Sam Darnold in that bucket or Baker Mayfield. These teams are really quick to move on from these rookie QBs. Trey Lance, like there's plenty of examples here that we can kind of do that. And I think the wise decision here is if you do need a quarterback, it's worth shopping that pick, right? Like right now I have the fantasy calc values up here. And if you have the 102, which is, assumedly the highest pick you'd spend on Fernando Mendoza. I don't think anyone's taking him over Jeremiah Love. But the 102, according to Fantasy Calc, could go buy you Trevor Lawrence, Brock Purdy, Jordan Love, Dak Prescott. Any one of those guys are below the value of the 102. I'm not necessarily buying that. I'm not trading Trevor Lawrence away for the 102 right now or Brock Purdy for that, but you might be able to go get Dak Prescott or a Jordan Love. So if you just need a starting quarterback, you're probably better off just going and buying that quarterback with the pick that you have rather than taking that dart throw on Fernando Mendoza here. Okay. That being said, before we dive into the data that I kind of dug up here, Jose, is there anything I said that prompted some discussion?
The biggest thing too is the retention of value is obviously important, but I think it's also that opportunity cost. Like, what did you give up instead? And obviously, sometimes that can be too revisionist. So you need to kind of be able to remember, or if it helps, like write something down somewhere. Like, how did I feel about this draft? Right? Like going into it, did you take Cam Ward at like the 105, 106 because you needed a quarterback, but you really liked Ibuka, but you really liked one of the tight ends, or you really liked etc. player like that went behind, right? Even RJ Harvey, is something like that. Or maybe you really like Jackson Dart, but you were like, oh no, Cam Ward 101, like it's blah, blah, blah. And you talked yourself into it, or you let yourself be talked into it. I think that's where you need to be a little bit conscious of your own thought process. Like, how are you arriving to your destination of making a pick? Like, are you just following some dude's rankings, whatever, or anybody's rankings, like word for word? Okay, so like, why did you do, you have to understand your process. But if you had any sort of conviction about Jackson Dart over Cam Ward, Ibuka as a prospect, any of the tight ends as a prospect, I think even though Cam Ward maybe has retained his value, right, his really bad season didn't tank his value into nothing. It maybe stayed somewhat flat. The opportunity cost of not drafting Ibuka, even though he didn't finish great, not drafting Colston Loveland, for example, Tyler Warren, or even Jackson Dart himself, right? Like, how much did their value increase? Like, how much could, if you just had a mid first and you traded back and then took Ibuka, let somebody else draft the Cam Ward, and then added value to your team, and then saw a spike in value in a Jackson Dart, for example, right? Like, that's obviously the perfect case scenario where you did that. But That's what I'm saying. Like, if you have strong convictions, like going back and looking at your draft board and being like, oh, yeah, of course I should have taken Jackson Dart over Cam Ward. It's like, well, yeah, that's revisionist history. But did you actually believe that? Like, in my drafts, I don't have a single Cam Ward because I believed in Jackson Dart. I was like, both of these guys feel like Hail Marys. I'll take the guy that seems to have better rushing and better intangibles and things that I liked in Jackson Dart. So I went out and drafted Jackson Dart in a few places, right? But that's what I actually believed. If I believed, like I was not in on Igbuka very much before the draft, so I would have probably never taken him over Cam Ward in a super flex, right? So I don't want to fool myself into saying that, that's bad process. You have to be able to remember your mentality back when you were making the picks or when you were getting ready to make the picks, right? Because otherwise, my argument is just going to sound like revisionist history, and I'm just going to talk about how you could have had Jameer Gibbs, but instead you drafted Bryce Young or something, like that, those sorts of things. But it's like you need to know what was your process and understand what your process is. If not, develop a process, right? Like that's part of why we're here. Like, how do you arrive at what pick and what players you like? Why do you do that, right? I think that's part of one of the big things about developing a process when you're drafting rookies.
Yeah, and that's good context to have here as we jump into this graph that I put together, which shows us the value of the top 10 picks, or according to ADP. And this ADP is taken from my fantasy league in Superflex leagues. So the top 10 picks for Superflex leagues from my fantasy league, and it shows us how their values changed over time here. So for here, we're looking at the 2025 class. That's what the x-axis here on the bottom is, from April 2025 to February 2026, where we are now. The left side here is their value, and these values were taken from Keep Trade Cut. So I went through, I just pulled the values for Keep Trade Cut, that's their lifetime value, and I kind of plotted them as we went in. So as you can see here, like Omarion Hampton at the top in April, started out pretty flat, and then in June there was a lot of hype for him, especially with Najee getting hurt, injuring his eye. And then as soon as we got to August, it started to dip, and that was just because the usage for him was not where we wanted to be. Najee started playing, he was good, he came back. Najee got hurt. Omarion Hampton's value started to rise, and then he got hurt and it dipped. So that's the life cycle of what we're looking at here for Omarion Hampton. So when we look at Cam Ward, which I think is who we're interested in here, his value through the summer was nice and steady, right around 40. I don't know, let's call it 4,700 right there. And then it dips all the way through November, all the way down to about 4,000. And then it slowly rises back up where we are now. I think his value is like 45, something close to that. So, fairly steady when you look at, some of these other ones here, where they can be all over the place. Like, let's look at Travis Hunter, which is the yellow line here. He goes up and he goes down, he levels out. As soon as the season starts, he goes down, drops, he spikes back up in November, and now just kind of like flat lines back out, where his value is now right around 4,000. Obviously, like the most valuable rookie out of this class, leaving it according to Keep Trade Cut, is Omarion Hampton, and the least valuable is Travis Hunter out of these top 10 picks. Sorry, who I've been saying Omarion Hampton is actually Ashton Genty.
I was trying to wait.
My
I was
bad.
like, wait, where's Genty? I was like, what am I missing here? Yeah, but I mean, I think it doesn't like what you said about Omarion Hampton doesn't like detract from the same feelings that you had about Genty, right? There's a spike, he goes 100,
Yeah.
101. You're excited. As soon as football starts, you see the dip in his value, right? In Genty's value, because of what his performances was, right? You had that streak where he had one really good game and then a couple of decent games. You're like, oh, maybe the Raiders are figuring it out. The value spikes, then it goes back down, and then now it's going up a little bit because the new coach is supposed to come in. Things change, right? So I think this is a great way to not do revisionist history and to understand the full season, right? You're seeing Cam Ward's values that you were talking about spiking up or starting to trend up, right? Because now he has Dable, right? Now he has a positive come in, right? And these are some of the things we talk about when we say, this episode is more about the draft, but this all ties in together. It's all one big package about trading, right? You don't want to be trading Travis Hunter, back in October. You don't want to be trading Genti back in October. You don't probably want to be trading him now anyways. But, like Jackson Dart, right? Look at the Jackson Dart line. He goes from one of the lowest, right? The second starting lowest position. And now it finishes tied for second, tied for right around third.
Yeah. He's up there
right?
with Tet and Quinshon.
Exactly. So if you're not believing in Jackson Dart's staying power, or you never believed in Jackson Dart, you just ended up with him, this is probably the pinnacle almost of where you could trade, besides right before when he got hurt, right? So these are kind of things that marry together, but I think this is a great way to kind of prove what I'm saying. Like it's not just about, hey, I picked Cam Ward, his stock dipped because it was a bad season, and then now it kind of rebounded and it's starting to go back up. Okay, so he held value. But what did I miss out on, right? Like, did I miss out on Jackson Dart? Did I miss out on Igbuka? Did I miss out on Tet, right? Because I'm talking about Cam Ward going in the middle. I saw Cam Ward going as early as like 103, right? Right behind the two running backs. So if you took him 103, the cost is way different, especially if you're comparing him to, Tet, comparing him to Quinshon. Like, so that's kind of where my thought is. It's like, what am I missing out on by drafting this quarterback that I don't believe in necessarily, right?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And I mean, if we look at this graph, like you would have been better off drafting any 70% of the class over Cam Ward here. So it was really hard to miss. But let's look at another year here. I'm going to bring up 2024, and I think this is a good example. This class is also a lot harder because we had those kind of elite end prospects. So it's like it's like you said, right? We need to kind of give context. We can't just look at this as revisionist history type of thing. We need to be able to, look back where our mindset was with these guys. And, it was pretty clear that Jaden Daniels and Caleb Williams were, 2 and 3. They were in the mix of the top 4 between them two, Marvin Harrison and Malik Neighbors. But in Superflex, a lot of times those guys, Marvin Harrison and Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels were going 101 and 102 in Superflex. And, for the most part, that was right process to kind of pull out, especially with Jaden Daniels. Caleb Williams is the blue line here. He did not, necessarily get the value back that you would have gotten with Malik Neighbors. Definitely better than Marvin Harrison Jr. But I think the more relevant guys to look at here are guys like the JJ McCarthy line or the Drake Maye line. Michael Penix didn't make the cut because if we remember back, he was the starter behind Kirk Cousins at the time. So he was, being drafted inside the late first or like inside that second round. So he's not really on this graph here. But I think if we look at Drake Maye or JJ McCarthy, these are good ones to kind of dissect here, which is, the light orange line for Drake Maye. Over that first year, it wasn't really good for him. He did gain value through the season. He gained, probably about 10 to 15% value and got himself up into the, the 6,000s. And then all the way through the off season, he maintained that until this year. He just skyrocketed into it. And if we look at JJ McCarthy, it's quite the opposite. He kind of gains value over the offseason because now he's healthy, he's got the starting job, and then he just crashes down and ends there. And I think my biggest takeaway from doing all this research here was I think the process in drafting these quarterbacks isn't necessarily that you're hoping for them to kind of maintain the value. They're the better bet for this ceiling, I think, is what happens is when they hit in Superflex leagues, they hit. You get Jaden Daniels or you get this Drake Maye spike where they're the number one asset, like they're going top 3 in startup picks type of thing. Like, I don't think anybody thought that about Drake Maye coming in. He wasn't that elite of an asset. Like, there was nobody putting Drake Maye over Caleb Williams or Jaden Daniels, and now everybody is doing that. So again, different prospects also, right? He still went inside the first round. I think he was a top 10 pick, if I'm not mistaken, in the NFL draft. So like, we had a lot more context and clues to kind of say like, okay, this could happen here with him. And in a competitive quarterback class at that too, right? It wasn't just, him alone in that top 10 and going, 101 like we have, Fernando, Mendoza, or otherwise. I'm going to keep this rolling here. I'm going to go into the next one. So I guess, Jose, give your thoughts on this class as I change it over.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, that's kind of the big difference in why this kind of all matters, right? The fact that it's Mendoza and just Mendoza pushes his value for the NFL way higher, right? You had Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, and Drake Maye go back to back, 1 through 3. That was where the 3 first picks. Michael Penix was a top 8. JJ McCarthy was top 10. Bo Nix was top 12. So you had, what is that, 5 quarterbacks? I mean, this was considered an elite wide QB class, right? 5 quarterbacks go in the top 12 of the NFL draft. That's a big difference than one guy and maybe one guy at the end, right? Like even from last year where Cam Ward and then Jackson Dart, right? Like there's just a big difference. And so, I do agree with what you said though, that the quarterbacks are in Superflex, especially the ones where if you hit on Jalen Hurts when he was going in the middle of the second in rookie drafts, you won the lottery basically, right? And that's what those players can be, more so than a Marvin Harrison, a Malik Neighbors, or even if you hit, a Puka Nakua. Like I don't think Puka and Superflex is fetching you a Drake Maye 1-for-1. Maybe it's close, right? But it's very close. So, like, you know what I'm saying? So I think you really, really need to hit on a crazy wide receiver like outlier than it is for the quarterbacks to hit. So I can understand from that perspective. And when you're talking about that sort of level of prospects, I definitely don't mind taking the shots. It's just like when we get to this class, and why the reason I didn't want to dive 5, 6, 7, however many players deep, is just if the top 2 guys don't seem like great bets on their own, why would the 4th or 5th guy seem like a better bet, right? Like you're talking about 5 dudes that went in the top 12 of the NFL draft. That's a big difference in, a dart that you're throwing metaphorically at a quarterback to gain that value spike than you are at a much worse, much lower prospect.
I skipped the 2023 class here, partly because my graphic didn't save right. But second, also, I feel like it's not as relatable here. The 2022 class is, as we were saying in our last episode, is a little more comparable to the QB class we have here, where we have one top end prospect, albeit a better polished prospect. That's Fernando Mendoza compared to Kenny Pickett here. Can you look up to where Kenny Pickett went in this 2022? I don't remember where he got drafted.
Yeah, he was in the teens because he went to
the Steelers.
The Steelers. So I'll get it right now for
you. Yeah. But I mean, here we have, Kenny Pickett starting
20th, not even
20th.
In the teens. So he's 20th.
Yeah. So definitely not the same, but comparable, right? We have, a kind of deprived quarterback class here, where a team who needed a quarterback felt like they could reach on Kenny Pickett and he would be suffice. But if you look at his value through the offseason, he lost value actually. Like he kind of game up, and then as the summer went on, he lost value, and then through November he gained a bunch of value, and then December it just dropped off. Maintained throughout that summer of 2023, and then he had a spike again in season, and then a really, really large dip. So I'm guessing at that point I think that's when he got benched for Mason Rudolph, if I'm remembering correctly, or maybe that's when the Steelers. Yeah, I think he got benched, and then the Steelers traded for Justin Fields and Russell Wilson, and then that was kind of the end of the Kenny Pickett experiment, and then his value just kind of bottoms out. And I mean, even if you look at this graph, right, at no point in time did he have a sell window that was higher than a lot of those other prospects at the time, right? I mean, his highest value was about 5,000. The lowest value here for Christian Watson over that time was like 2,500, but that was before his first season even started. He skyrocketed up and got past that, right? And I mean, you can look at who else is over here. Like Treylon Burks had more value than Kenny Pickett for a lot of that same stretch. So as I was going through this, I was actually a little sad because I was like, I wanted to make a point and kind of like shove it to you, you know, like I was like, no, look, this is the right process. But I was like, no, I don't feel like this is the right process. And Jose's onto something here. Maybe we should be a little more protective of our high end draft capital at the very least. I think it's fine taking dart throws on these guys that land in the first round at the end of the first round for your rookie drafts or start of the second round. I think that's probably good process because especially in a not rich draft class, right, where there's not a lot of talent around them, you're just aiming for upside and for ceiling, and you're just taking shots on these guys, hoping that they hit and they become Brock Purdy or whoever it may be.
Yeah, I mean that's where you're literally kind of playing the lotto and going to be a mega millionaire. I think trying to play the lotto when you could go to your job and make good money is when there's a problem, right? Like one's a pretty sure we know that drafting there's always busts in every class for every position, but the NFL has found the science to drafting running backs and wide receivers way better than quarterbacks just because of the simplicity of the position compared to quarterback. But so if there's a way more sure thing there, then I think it makes sense. I also want to point out JMac conveniently left out the chart that would prove my point even more, because the 2023 class was the one where you had the 3-pack of quarterbacks that went right after Bijan in most drafts, leaving behind Gibbs, JSN, Devon Achan, and so forth. So like that draft points it out even more, where people were so hungry. And Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, Anthony Richardson's obviously gone from existence, but Bryce Young and CJ Stroud are starters in the NFL. They're playing. They're every week. You're not excited about any of them. I know CJ Stroud had the rookie season and people were going crazy, but apart from that, they have not been quarterbacks that you want to have in a super flex league, right? And I think that's one of the ones where if you had that process where you're like, oh yeah, these guys and those guys went top, so it's not exact science in any sort of way, but I do think that like paying attention to what the NFL does can be helpful, but also understanding, like I said, like there is a like you said, a time I think where it makes sense to take that big swing. And there's also a time where, hey, Gibbs is an elite, running back prospect behind Bijan. JSN is an elite wide receiver prospect, or seemed to be, from what I remember in that time. Like maybe I don't take the swing on, a quarterback who is the size of a quarterback that's pretty much never succeeded in the NFL, or a quarterback that's played 15 games as a starter, or whatever the crazy stat is, like 18 games between high school and college, or in Anthony Richardson, right? Like there was a lot of red flags on those quarterbacks that even the NFL was talking about, but they reached and went for those guys because the NFL needs quarterbacks. So I think there is a lot of moving pieces, and obviously there's no exact science.
Yeah, and I do have it up here. I went and fished it out for you guys so you can pause it and look at it. But yeah, I mean, this tells the tale of both sides of the argument to me, right? Because I mean, if you took CJ Stroud, like if you had a window where you could sell and get Bajan and Gibbs, you know what I mean? Like, it and even then, like Anthony Richardson still had more value than Jahmyr Gibbs through a lot of that time too. Bajan was always exceeding him. Bryce Young is really like the cautious tale here, who never had more value than Jordan Addison for most of that, right? So, and that's the hard one too, is because he was going over all of those guys, for the most part. So it's like you don't really know, like you can't just trust the NFL to tell you who the top guys are to take. You really need some sort of process or like inclination of what you're doing. And this was, a pretty strong quarterback class coming out of it too. And now you look at it, you don't want any of those quarterbacks over Bijan, over CJ Stroud, Jahmyr Gibbs or JSN. Obviously, JSN took 2 years to develop to kind of get you to where you're at now, but if you were patient, it paid off. Okay, man, we've ran pretty long here, but I think we did a lot of good work here. Hopefully, you guys got a good amount out of this. I'll find a way to put these down in the description. So if you guys want to go and look at the work and kind of what I did to dissect this, feel free to jump in there and view it. But yeah, let's jump into the outro here. Jose, that was a good discussion. Thank you for bringing light to kind of how we should be looking at these draft picks and these quarterbacks and how we can spend them more wisely. Yeah, off season is here. We have more rookies coming next week. We're going to be talking. I don't know. We haven't discussed what we're going to be talking. I think we saved the wide receivers for last. Best for last.
Yeah.
But yeah, man. Fast draft. Like, subscribe. Jose, do your thing, bro.
Yep, as always, guys, hit that like button, that follow button, leave a comment on YouTube. If you're finding us on Player Profiler Network, come check us out. We're at Future First Pod on YouTube, and wherever you get podcasts, you can find us. We really appreciate your interactions, and hope you guys enjoyed the Super Bowl, and we'll see you next week.
Peace.